everyone. This is Enshohma. So the podcast you're about to listen to was done last Mother's Day, way back in May of 2017. Unfortunately, due to several reasons, mainly me, you're going to be getting this podcast way later, and 2 days, if not 3 days, probably even 4 days, after the home video release of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But it is an entertaining listen to, as me and Andres share our initial thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy. And again, so sorry that this is coming in way later than it should be. In fact, in the future, me and Andres, but mainly me, will be taking steps to make sure that Enshohma-based podcasts don't come in so late as they usually do, mainly because of me. So I hope you enjoy the following, and take care, everyone, until we meet again in the future.
Hello, people of the internet, and welcome to another theatrical movie review. Of course, I am your host, Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir, and here with me is an individual you have seen plenty of times here on the channel. Give it up for Enshohma.
I am Enshohma.
That's probably the most simplest and least energetic introduction, but I guess it'll do for this movie. So we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which is the latest in the Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, following Doctor Strange, and will soon be followed up with Spider-Man Homecoming. So because this is probably the first Marvel movie we are going to talk about, Enshohma, would you like to give your brief thoughts on the Marvel movies that have led up to this and your opinion on them as a whole or in general?
I am Enshohma. I am Enshohma. I am Enshohma. I am Enshohma.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Well, it's better than doing Galaxy, right? That's probably the one joke I'm going to do throughout this whole thing, ladies and gentlemen.
In that case, I would have preferred the Groot shtick.
Okay, the Groot... Okay, then, my thoughts on the previous Marvel movies. I've had my issues with them, as you've famously stated in other podcasts, with and without me. I forget which one, but you really made a big ruckus about my supposed hatred for human-looking aliens.
Yeah, back in my day, they used to have 5 arms and 3 titties and 2 heads. These aliens look too human. I'm Enshohma, and I'm never satisfied with anything.
I'm an old man. I'm yelling at a cloud. But, okay, so my feelings towards the Marvel movies, joking aside, though, is that they are very much true to the spirit of the original comics they're getting at, especially since these movies are made to be more fun and lighthearted than a lot of other comic book adaptations.
And overall, trying to appeal to a much larger demographic in order to get the widest or the largest amount of success possible.
Indeed, especially since it never goes into the dramatic grimness or pathos bordering on bathos that the DC movies currently are, or even those blasted X-Men films, as you know, that I'm not a big fan of. But that's a whole different podcast conversation in its own right. But for the most part, as far as the spirit and the humor and the heart goes with the Marvel movies, I've never been that excited or that supportive of the visual and design elements. Like, they're obviously imaginative comic book movies, but they don't feel comic booky enough in the sense that they really limit a lot of the fantasy elements. I'm not just talking about a choice in alien designs, but it feels like it's just about to hit the colorful insanity that Marvel was well known for in its heyday, and then suddenly takes itself back extremely, especially in regards like villains being greatly underdeveloped.
Although you could say that the reason why they do that is because they spend so much time making their protagonists more compelling.
That is true, but at the same time, you see that problem in modern-day comic books, Marvel and regardless, where the villains really don't matter, and it's more just heroes fighting other heroes. Or it's just heroes doing very mundane things that may seem entertaining to somebody who enjoys such dramatics, but not entertaining for somebody who's looking out for fantasy-based adventures. But for everything that I don't like about the Marvel movies, it's definitely balanced out with everything I do enjoy. And I'm always looking forward, and I'm very supportive of each one that comes out, regardless if I end up liking them or not. And indeed, of all the so-called cinematic universes going on right now,
Hmm.
this one, it's not the first, let's get that out of the way, but it certainly is the most coherent and most successful, both in its execution and, of course, being Hollywood, the money. Even knowing the continuity isn't perfect, and again, I think they screw over a lot of the original elements that made the comic book characters special. Sometimes it's justifiable. There's no way you could do something utterly ridiculous and put it on screen and let audience members know. But at the same time, I think catering to the mainstream audience has both been a strength and weakness for the Marvel movies. So you definitely see it in the 20th Century Fox films that produce the Fantastic Four films, where the original Fantastic Four, or even the modern day version of the Fantastic Four comics, are very wild and out there and even kind of campy, but deliberately so. And yet, when you see the movies, even, you know, before the recent Fan Four Stick, that terrible reboot, they really kind of, how should I say, hesitated at embracing the comic book elements. Thankfully, the Marvel movies have gained such a following that the studio is feeling more comfortable with it, and this Phase 3 I am just loving the heck out of, because this is supposed to be the cosmic era that's leading up to even bigger crossovers and storylines to come, and because of which they've really played with the color and the imaginative visuals. Even knowing, again, I have my problems with these films, what works extremely well.
Hmm.
I do have to admit, though, getting back to appealing to the mainstream audience members, it works great, but I've also noticed that a lot of diehard comic book fans, and we're talking true diehards, not just people who are familiar with whatever was published in the 90s and forward.
Like me.
Yeah, no offense, my dear friend. They really do get upset at a lot of the changes that happens, even if it's just minor character-based ones. I have a friend named Mark Tucker who's a sort of a writer and free thinker, and he openly loves to admit that. He seems to have this kind of reaction where the first time he watches a Marvel movie, Marvel Studio film, I should say, and these are the films that are produced from Marvel Studios and distributed originally through Paramount and then later currently now through Disney. And these films are all interconnected in direct continuity, as opposed to something like the first couple Sony Spider-Man movies, which, yes, they were Spider-Man films, but they were separated from this Marvel Cinematic Universe. Blah, 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 complicated, skullduggery Hollywood bull crap. Where was I? Oh, yes. Okay, these films, they do change a lot to appeal to the mainstream audience. Sometimes they're major changes, like screwing over relatively neat-looking villains and making them very minor obstacles for the...
Or having to skip over the Hank Pym Ant-Man and go straight into the Scott Lang Ant-Man.
There's that, but another bigger offenders I'd have to feel is like...
Having Iron Man make Ultron.
Yeah, there's differences like that. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Having Iron Man make Ultron. I almost said
That would be cool if
Voltron.
he were. That would be cool if he made Voltron. Let's be honest.
No, it wouldn't. It would just give.
Yes, it would. Fuck you. Don't get in the way of my giant robot fiction.
It would give Tony Stark another reason to lull himself over everyone. So screw him. So, no. Yes, there are minor differences. Okay, that's not really too much of a minor difference. That's like saying Dracula made Frankenstein's monster and Frankenstein was nowhere around. But for a mainstream audience, they wouldn't much care about that. On the other hand, you also have like villains who are much bigger deals in the comic books being turned into very minor obstacles for the heroes to fight in the prologue of the various films. A good example would be Skullbones at the beginning of the third
Crossbones,
Captain America.
right?
Crossbones, thank you. Crossbones at the beginning of the third Captain America movie was a perfect example of this. He's supposed to be a slightly bigger deal in the comics, and instead he goes boom quickly. So yes, I know he was a major part of the Winter Soldier film, but it's the equivalent of like people were really looking forward to see the Scarecrow in action, and even knowing I like Cillian Murphy in Batman Begins, you really did want to see him in full-on Scarecrow regalia, and yet you never got the chance. But he's still alive. That character's still alive within that that own trilogy of films, then that's, somewhat forgivable. Whereas Marvel, they seem to go through villains like Power Rangers go through season 2 putty patrollers, or stereotypical takes on Star Trek goes through red shirts.
And while that's kind of the case with this movie, I would say that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 actually has probably one of the better villains, if not one of the best villains in this series of films so far.
I was going to save the whole villain thing later, because one of the things I love about Phase 3 is I think they're slowly and surely getting out of the villain rot. But we'll save that for a little later towards the spoiler half, if you will.
Okay, sure.
But like I said, my final thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which started with the first Iron Man movie with Robert Downey Jr., and the next movie in the phase, not counting the Spider-Man one, is Thor Ragnarok. These films, like I said, for everything that they kind of get wrong, they make up for with everything they get right, especially, again, compared to the much more grim, much more straight-faced, but no fun and not that enjoyable comic book movies such as the everything DC is currently doing, and those X-Men movies directly from 20th Century Fox, which, despite the fact that they're based on the Marvel comics, they are not connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although, try telling that to a lot of comic book purists who are incredibly cynical, like my aforementioned friend, or even the mainstream audience who thinks one Spider-Man is no different from the other Spider-Man, which is sadly kind of true.
So anyways...
Have you gotten the hint that I'm not happy with all these Spider-Man reboots? Like, we should just...
Because I'm old and I don't like change! I'm just kidding. I know, that's
I don't
not
mind
it.
I don't mind change, but when you have the same guests come over every 2 days, it gets a little annoying.
I don't like explaining shit to the young people.
I don't... it's like at least Godzilla had the dignity to take a 15-year-long break. It's like they got to keep making a Spider-Man movie every 3 weeks.
Why does Aunt May and Peter Parker keep getting younger?
We got to bring in those Spidey bucks.
Is this Benjamin Button?
Poor Sony. Without Spider-Man, they'd be in the drink.
Well, at least they got Ghostbusters.
Oh, no. Back in my day, Ghostbusters was funny and competently made, as opposed to not being that funny and not that competently made. So, insert joke about women.
The old times were better.
No, they weren't. Well, maybe.
Back then, everybody used to wear sexy black leather outfits.
If you're referring to the Batman Returns Catwoman, I never found that sexy, believe it or not.
Oh, believe you me. Sure has.
You're a 90s kid. Okay, that's where I see the joke is getting from.
X-Men and Batman.
Oh, yeah, that too. I'll take...
And perhaps Superman, if that movie had ever gotten made.
Oh, well, if you're talking about the second Superman movie from the 70s, sure, we'll go with Ursula, or what was ever her name was.
No. If you remember the death of Superman, or Superman Lives.
Oh, was that supposed to feature some female femme fatale or something?
No. I'm saying that they would have somehow adapted the black suit from the Return of Superman story.
Okay. My mind is somewhere completely different. No, you're totally right. For a long while, a lot of comic book movies were basically men and women in leather outfits, and that was it.
Yeah.
Again,
so
the
anyways,
first X-Men movie.
To talk about
to talk
about
something
that's none of that, something that is none of that, we had the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So what was your thoughts on the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie? 14 minutes into this review.
Oh yeah, this is going well. The first movie was a pleasant surprise. So much so that even the massive changes they did, and trust me, of all the Marvel movies that did major changes to the original characters, I think Guardians of the Galaxy was the biggest offender. But
ironically enough, it's one of the biggest examples of Marvel changing its comics in order to fit the movies. The Guardians of the Galaxy more so than anyone else. Although from what I understand, this is based on like the 2008 incarnation of the Guardians of the Galaxy and not the other version that's previously starred Adam Warlock. Although, I'm going to be honest, I was never a Guardians of the Galaxy fan. I didn't even knew who they were until I saw that episode of Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. And so I I'm sure like 90% of the people out there couldn't have cared less about the Guardians until the movie came out. I'm pretty sure not even comic fans even knew who they were. General comic fans, to be exact.
I was going to get to the point. It wasn't just like characters like Rocket Raccoon and Groot who were more or less true to their original characters, and yes, they were changed heavily in the comics beforehand. But it's like the biggest example, which ironically is also one of the best elements of this second movie we'll talk about in a little bit. Yondu himself doesn't look anything like his original counterpart, despite the fact that he's blue and he has a red fin. But he's completely different because in the original comic books, even in recent incarnations, true, they did change the comic book characters to fit the film mold, but for the longest time, Yondu was very much sort of like a Geronimo-type alien hero from The Last of His Kind, and now he's more or less just another Kree who is now a space pirate redneck, so to speak. No offense to Michael Rooker, but that's the unfortunate state of things. And in addition to that, I hate to say it so, but Marvel was really desperate to turn Guardians of the Galaxy into a brand.
Yeah, they pretty much shoved those characters everywhere, even going so as far as to have Iron Man join the Guardians of the Galaxy at one point.
This was well before the movie came out, so we kept getting Guardians of the Galaxy here and there shoved into our faces constantly. And they're an interesting group of characters, but I can see why. I don't know, maybe the comics sold well enough, or Marvel felt that it sold just well enough for Marvel to keep throwing into our faces.
But you know what? At least it's something different and not just another Iron Man. Or, you and I, we mentioned several times, especially in our Batman reviews, how much DC likes to pimp out Batman a lot, if not Superman and the Justice League. So it's really nice to get a new character to introduce to the masses.
It's funny you should mention it. Now thinking about it, Marvel is a little more open to actually have adventures in space and do a lot of these cosmic-based characters and storylines, whereas DC seems to be a little embarrassed of their more fanciful past and more major characters.
And especially Fox with the X-Men.
Let's forget about those films. Screw Fox. Again, I don't like the X-Men movies. There are exceptions to the rule, obviously, but for the most part, as far as I'm concerned, the X-Men movie shouldn't even be brought into this conversation, despite the fact that I began bringing it into this conversation. I'm a hypocrite. But no, the big thing is, I think Marvel, especially these days, are more willing to play around with the cosmic-based characters and storylines than DC, who seems a little embarrassed about all of their space-related adventures, hence the reason why we spend too much time in Gotham, too much time with Batman, whereas Superman is constantly kicked to the curb and made a very unreasonable, unlikable character because, he's an alien, so of course he has to alienate everybody, even knowing that for the longest time the joke was Superman was more human than Batman. And Batman's supposed to be the normal human being, yet he's this broody gargoyle in a cape. But with Marvel, they really seem to have embraced the whole cosmic angle of their stories and comic series immensely. Just give me a moment to breathe here. And the success of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie seemed to be either a fortunate accident or a really well done stroke of planned genius. Yeah.
Genius.
But for the most part, I feel that maybe the Guardians of the Galaxy movie was a surprise success because it was a low-budget movie despite the fact that it took place in space with a bunch of aliens. It wasn't as highly profiled as some of the other previous Marvel movies, especially the somewhat underwhelming sequel to Iron Man. Again, I like a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, but the ones with the problems still have to be mentioned. But no, when I saw the movie, it was a general surprise. It felt fresh and different from a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe outings, especially since it didn't have to play housekeeping with all the continuity and connections to other Marvel films, outside brief mentions of Infinity Stones and return appearance by the Collector. And the characters were really likable, so much so that on repeat viewings, you only fully realize just how horrible these characters are and how much death and destruction they're both directly and indirectly responsible for. We get a little bit of that in the second movie, but it's nowhere near as bad as the first film when you rewatch it. But again, the characters were so interesting and unique, and of course the actors related to them did such a good job that I can see why America instantly fell in love with these characters.
And why it was so popular that DC tried to capitalize on that success with Suicide Squad and failing really hard at it.
But let's also not forget the critical backlash towards Batman v Superman, a movie that made a lot of money but got a lot of complaints for being way too grim and way too dark for something with freaking Superman
and
inside
that is really
of it.
funny because that's really funny because with a movie that features nothing but a bunch of rowdy with a bunch of rowdy, irresponsible and dangerous characters, you end up feeling more sympathy for them than supposedly three or mostly two of America's most popular heroes.
Yeah, that's, you know, it's funny. As much as I like to as much as people like to complain about the MCU, that's what I'll be calling it from now on, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As much as people like to complain about the MCU having a lack of decent villains, or at least decent screen time for even the good villains, I think DC is the complete opposite. They spend too much time with their villains. Hence the reason why we ended up getting a Suicide Squad movie before we even saw the Wonder Woman movie. Let alone the fact that even the Batman movies, as good as they got, they spent too much time with the antagonist. And yes, I know DC has some of the best supervillains on Earth. So much so they rival even Spider-Man. That group of rogue galleries, that rogue gallery of Spider-Man villains that everybody and their mother seems to defend constantly.
You got a problem with Hydro Man?
Hey, Hydro Man is my jam, dude. He's the greatest character ever.
All right.
Let's also not forget about Swiss Miss, the greatest musical villain ever.
And the Spot. Don't forget the Spot.
The Spot. Oh, dude. I think this podcast is over. Let's just talk about the Spot for the next 3 hours. Chip, cheerio!
Going to the Galaxy
the Spot, 2. And I have the ability to recreate Acme Looney Tune physics to defeat my enemies. Oh my! That's my impression of the Spot, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome.
No wonder people complain about these reviews getting too long to get to the fucking point. Anyways, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So you like the first movie. I like the first movie. I was excited for the second movie. I'm assuming you were looking forward to it. So, did you like it?
Yes, I liked it. We got to the point.
All right, good. All right. End of review.
All right, bye, everybody.
Okay. Goodbye. All right, and anyways, so I noticed that with this movie, or I guess just to basically go to do what I usually do for these reviews, a brief plot synopsis. Basically, a certain amount of time has passed since the last movie, and we see the movie starts off with our Guardians in the middle of their latest mission, and once the mission is over, Rocket Raccoon ends up pissing off their employers, and so they end up being chased off an island, chased off the planet, and into their next adventure. And so we meet Ego, the living planet, played by Kurt Russell, who reveals himself to be Star-Lord, or Peter Quill's long-lost father. And at that point, the group separate, they start doing their own separate things, and we got kind of several plot threads going on. So what this movie kind of does is they kind of break up the team and have each character wrapped up in their own subplot, where we have Rocket Raccoon and Yondu is having to deal with a mutiny taking place on Yondu's ship. We have Peter Quill finding out who he is, and as well as him dealing with his relationship with Gamora. We have Gamora dealing with her family blood feud with her stepsister. What was her name? Nebula, thank you. She was played by I remember her. She was being played by the actor who played Amy in Doctor Who.
Karen Gillan, the very lovely
yes.
Karen Gillan.
Yes. Even in that blue and purple makeup, she still looks very beautiful, I would say.
I prefer Karen Gillan out of makeup, but for some reason, there's a lot of Nebula fans out there. So I guess they like their blue-skinned cyborg women.
Or maybe it's boldness. Maybe guys are into bald chicks. Who knows?
When a bald chick can rock the look, it's definitely attractive.
She can. Yeah. She can definitely do
Indeed.
that. And finally, we have, Drax and Mantis, who have a lot of really funny moments, a lot of great lines together, and it's kind of sort of a thing where you have two characters who are completely oblivious to social norms trying to interact with each other, and Mantis seen as him and his words and his like way of living as sort of demeanor is the social norm. And finally, we have Baby Groot, who is Baby Groot, and we love him because he is Baby Groot.
Wow, that's probably like the best plot synopsis you did for a very confusing plot that would have pissed off a lot of normal people.
So here's my first question to you. Do you think this movie succeeds at trying to develop all these characters at the same time, or do you think it kind of feels a bit like a jumbled mess? Because that's one of the things with this movie where it was forced to confront a situation that Avengers 2 did, where the first movie was pretty easy, where you get to spend your time introducing these characters and eventually having them come together. The biggest problem with this movie, just like Avengers 2, is what do you do next? Now that they're together, what's the next thing they're supposed to do? How do you get them to progress as a team now that they've already stayed together? And I guess that's kind of like the thing with this movie is, sure, they're together, but how will they stay together is I guess the next natural point in the story. It's surprising that they were willing to separate the characters and having them do their own thing as opposed to keeping them together for most of the plot. So what do you thought about that approach?
Well, the incredible irony with that said is that with the Avengers films, the first one and the second one, they had tons of other movies that introduce all these various characters. Yet the second movie really did feel a little bit of a mess, not a complete mess, but it really did feel like, again, Marvel was too concerned with housekeeping its own continuity within the MCU, and the movie really felt more like setting up for a bunch of plots for future films and really focusing on the main story, which was sort of the beauty of the first Avengers movies, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. And again, getting back to that irony, is that we've only just been recently introduced to all these characters with the first Guardians of the Galaxy, yet they are so endearing and so memorable that right away with this sequel, even with all the plot turns and plot twists and subplots going on, we know them well enough. We don't need to know their origin stories all over again, even knowing that origins are as a big element to some of the lead characters' backstories. Origins is a major part of one of our lead heroes and the point of this entire film. But the great thing is, because we've already been introduced to these characters, we know them well enough, we can just see them interact further. It's sort of compared to like the first Star Wars movie, where it introduced us to this world and its various characters. Yet in Empire Strikes Back, what a lot of people tend to forget, outside the fact that it's a much darker movie and the stakes are raised, is that there's a lot of really good character interaction and character moments, both small and big. And I think Guardians of the Galaxy is very much in that same regard. Of course, it's a much more comical and lighthearted movie, almost shockingly too. It's after watching it the first time, I was afraid, is this movie too comical? And as you know, with my twisted sense of humor, it's like, for crying out loud, I'm one of the few people who will wholeheartedly defend The Fifth Element, and that's a movie that's often looked at as another terrible 90s movie, when in reality it's a beautifully made, somewhat campy but deliberately so action comedy. Unfortunately, a lot of new millennials tend to miss the joke. This movie was very much in the Fifth Element vibe as far as its wild science fiction ideas go, as well as the comedy and the very memorable characters. And that's the thing about Guardians of the Galaxy. Despite the characters being so rather miserable people, both in their origins and their, hang-ups, or inner demons, if you will, they are ultimately filled with a lot of heart, maybe even more so than the Earth-based MCU characters. Like, nothing against Robert Downey Jr. and his Tony Stark character, but, I'd rather spend a day with Rocket Raccoon, and that guy really has some issues. Another thing is, little character moments go a long way, and that's something I always say about any movie. You really want to develop a character, give them little character moments to flesh them out further.
Oh yeah, and this movie definitely has plenty of those.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it really opens and expands the characters out beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get into examples of little character moments because we'll be here all day. And
we'll again be tipping into spoiler territory
there. Yeah, true. We're almost to the spoiler section, my friends. as you mentioned with the plot synopsis, it's a very complicated plot. But because we love these characters so much, and these characters are so entertaining and well performed by the actors, that we're in the story. So it's okay for most people, I have to say, because I'm going to get to one of the problems I've noticed, that when we do get into incredibly bizarre concepts like HP...
The Celestial Ego, the Living Planet.
I was going to say H.P. Lovecraft presents Kurt Russell. Yeah, when we get into moments like that, it still works because these are some really well done characters, and the art direction is beautiful. Like the first Guardians, the first Guardians of the Galaxy was a very colorful, a vibrant movie, but again, it was a low budget film. It was, and again,
like how much was that movie?
I have no idea, but I know it was done on a fairly low budget. You'll probably look up the numbers. But then again, we're talking about Hollywood. You know, a dinner is like 16 million, so whatever. The first film was very colorful. It had a lot of really neat and bizarre elements thrown in, but at the same time, they kind of toned down what was originally represented in the comic books. Yes, we got Rocket Raccoon, we got Groot. There were tons of, I have to admit, there was tons of bizarre aliens in the background, but the majority aliens were just human beings in slight makeup, and we'll get into that later. This film, however, just builds upon from what was established in the first film and goes full on with more imaginative designs, even if the designs in question are the humanoid aliens. I really liked one of the villains in this, the Sovereign, these gold super yuppies from outer space.
Mm-hmm.
They were just, even though in their design and their concept is fairly simple, they're just gold humans.
Right.
They're very well done. And, again,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things about this movie I really liked. In fact, I rewatched the first Guardians of the Galaxy recently, and the movie still holds up very well. But having seen this movie, and this is my third time watching it, in fact...
Oh, by the way, Guardians of the Galaxy, that was a $200 million movie.
$200 million. The first one.
Yeah, and it made back like $700 million, which is pretty rare nowadays, considering how we were. I think Deadpool, Zilla, and I were just talking last year about how a lot of movies failed to like even reach that level.
Well, what's funny is $200 million is kind of average for a lot of Hollywood movies, but at least it's not like the $300 millions that we keep seeing these days. And yes, the movies don't make back their money. But then again, it's a fairly... That's the thing about the MCU movies. Yes, they're multi-million-dollar productions, but they're nowhere near the excess of other major Hollywood films. On the other hand, that probably leads to their success, but that's a whole different thing. The whole Hollywood...
Anyways, back to what you were talking about.
Blah, 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 Hollywood apocalypse, back to Guardians of the Galaxy. So, if the Hollywood apocalypse is a real thing, wink, wink... No one got that joke, huh?
Anyways,
yeah, you're gonna edit this whole part out, huh?
I need to edit a lot of shit out.
I'm
here.
sorry. All right. Anyways, I think I really enjoy this second Guardians of the Galaxy movie a lot more than the first one. But at the same time, with that said, they're both equally enjoyable. I'm very much looking forward to the third appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy, even though their third movie is a long ways away. In fact, they're supposed to be showing up in the Infinity Wars, which I think is supposed to be next year.
Next week, yes, because we're going to be going that fast.
Oh, I wish they was coming next week, considering we have to. The next movie in the MCU is another Spider-Man movie.
And then after that, we're gonna have Thor Ragnarok as well, which I forgot to mention earlier in the review.
Thor Ragnarok is the one I'm looking forward to, not just because that was a really good trailer, but it's...
We finally got the Hulk back!
Yeah.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo's take on the Hulk is just an enjoyable character in its own right. So, but... No, this movie clicked. They took everything that was good about the first Guardians of the Galaxy. They amped it up to 11, build upon it, extrapolated all that was there, both the visual, the comedy, the character, the heart. And again, both movies are equally enjoyable, but I think this one has a slightly better edge, especially for somebody like me who enjoys high fantasy and colorful wackiness. In fact, this is...
What sort of specific examples would you say gave it that edge?
Again, embracing the comedy more so than the first film. The first film was funny, and it had a lot of funny moments, but here this film almost goes into slapstick cartoon territory, and yet it works. Like I've seen movies that do the same and almost fails. I know a
Yeah.
lot of movie audiences who are not that big on this movie have complained about the comedy being overwhelming, but at the same time, I think these.
And that's kind of like some people's opinions on like the MCU as a whole, because I think there's like a group of individuals or a group of the fan base that are kind of at this point maybe tired out by the more comedic approach and all of the snarky acting characters that the MCU loves to revel in.
It's strange you should say that because even compared to the past MCU movies that did play heavily on the comedy, especially when you have Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo just going at it. So that came out wrong. This movie definitely is just it's way too it's too silly, but it's just the right amount of silly. You know, it's I
Yeah, and it almost seems like it's kind of a bit of a commentary, sort of, because there are portions that I mentioned early on when I was watching the movie, when I was talking to you, that it seemed like there were portions where it seemed like the characters were kind of commenting on the type of humor that they were using towards each other, and almost like a little bit of a meta commentary sort of way. And it's also trying to like there are characters that are going to say a joke, but then the joke ends up falling flat for them, making that another form of comedy for us.
So practically Drax every time he tries to tell a joke.
Or whenever Peter Quill and Rocket interact with each other.
I think the best word to use just to explain the strength of the movie is it's charming and eccentric. And you don't see that often in Hollywood, even in the
Very true.
even in.
I mean, the last thing I can think of is just like something. I know this is a really crazy example, but like the Animaniacs, were just a bunch of crazy characters, and a lot of the comedy just seeing them interact with the people around them.
You know, I tend to notice now that you bring it up, comedy works a lot better when everybody's on the same level of silliness. Like it's a mad, mad, mad world.
I could see.
That's a really good movie, although it's kind of hard to watch in this day and age where stupidity seems to be commonplace. It's for crying out loud, the mother-in-law character would have been a Trump supporter, and if not a Hillary supporter, because we're screwed either way. But no, that movie works because it's filled to the brim with offbeat and bizarre characters. Even the cameo appearances are bizarre and offbeat. You know, everyone's a cartoon in there, as opposed to, say, some comedy films like I think some of the Jim Carrey movies where everyone's a straight man except Jim Carrey and becomes a little jarring. And I think here it's a perfect example, which, again, when we get to the spoilers, I'll explain why the humor helps in elements that have failed in other Marvel movies. And compared to past Marvel movies, yeah, this is definitely way more comical. Like, you know, we've gotten the Galaga gag in the first Avenger movie, but not compared to the video game gag we get in this one. So
Right. And we get a lot of moments where certain background characters would get their time to shine, especially when when we see what were the name of the gold people?
the Sovereign.
The Sovereign. Just the Sovereign. Okay, the Sovereign. We see their henchmen, and the henchmen, they got these like remote control arcade style machines that help them pilot these starships when they try to kill the Guardians of the Galaxy. But in the end, they end up like, whenever you see their reactions, it's almost like they're at an arcade rally, and they're all saying, like, they're cheering each other on, and whenever they lose, it's like they lost at a video game. They're like, oh, god damn it, and everyone's like, oh. It's a really nice moment just to see these henchmen get a type of being spotlighted on in a way that you don't really see in most action movies.
Do you remember the third Iron Man movie?
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite part in the whole movie is when Tony Stark, who's only armed with limited weapons and gadgets,
Oh yeah, and he was kicking everyone's ass.
Yeah.
And then there's that one henchman who's like, I even like this guy. You know, you can find him over there.
Yeah, imagine that henchman times 100, and it gives you a good idea just how stronger the villains are in this movie. All of them, not just the Sovereign. So
Right.
Yeah, but then again, a comedy movie where everybody gives off a good joke or everyone's eccentric and offbeat works a lot better than a movie where only a couple of characters are comical and everyone else is too serious.
Or it's like that one other moment where you see the Sovereign approaching Yondu, And of course, being the snooty queen that she is, she has this like rug that the servants place in front of her when she's walking on the snow on that snowy planet. And then there's a point where like the mechanical like rug device stops working, and so there's an awkward pause, and everyone. And so it's nice that they have this kind of high and mighty queen having a little moment of embarrassment for her.
Yeah, that little gag was almost Python-esque in its execution, because if you notice that blue carpet that she's walking on just because she doesn't want to touch the snowy ground, it extends for...
And to keep up appearances,
that's the sovereign. They're so perfect, they gotta look perfect.
But
no, what's hilarious, if you notice behind her, the blue carpet that they literally...
goes all the way back.
Yeah, it's like at least 100 feet behind her.
Yeah.
So I do not want to see the deleted scene where her chambermaids have to roll that thing up.
Oh, boy.
With that said, though, I think we just hit the spoiler territory.
Well, not yet. I do also want to bring up Sylvester Stallone, because given his very minor part in this, despite being a very large role. That's the thing. When it comes to like the villains in this movie, before I get to Sylvester Stallone, they've always managed to get these wonderful actors and waste them.
Yes.
I think there was this one point where funny enough, this something my friends and I from the SOS discovered, where the director of Thor: The Dark World was the same director as Terminator Genesis, and both of them featured past doctor actors in villainous roles and wasted both of them. I find it like, how do you do that? How do you screw up twice with past doctor actors?
Yeah, but to be fair, Hollywood has always had a bad habit of, oh no, it's a British actor. He must be an evil person.
But like you said, we were talking about how a lot of these minor characters would also have their time to shine, and for Sylvester Stallone's character, as brief of an appearance that he makes, he does a wonderful job, and he does a very convincing alien voice. He doesn't sound like anyone from this Earth.
It was
from this planet.
Funny. I was about to mention, I like Sylvester Stallone. I really can't fault the man too.
No, of course, I love him as well.
Yeah, but with that says, and I'm one of those guys. I even like Sylvester Stallone in his bad movies. I'm one of those guys who didn't think that Judge Dredd movie was too off. But with that said, man, he has a hard voice, doesn't he?
Yeah. You broke the code, you were being greedy lads,
What are you trying to tell me, boy? Listen, I'm the blue one. I'm supposed to be the weird sounding one.
I don't know what you're talking about, because I was trying to tell you.
Your Sylvester Stallone is definitely better than my Michael Roker. So.
Or like, if you want to hear like a completely incomprehensible Sylvester Stallone, just look at like the ending to First Blood. Although that one actually has some context to it. Like, and then the blood was all over me.
Yeah. Again, I love Sylvester Stallone. He's the kind of guy I wouldn't mind meeting in real life, but at the same time, that's a hard voice to deal with. In fact, it probably would be better off we don't meet him in real life. It would be like trying to understand a 2-year-old.
Oh, no, I've seen him I actually saw him in person at a Comic-Con panel when they were promoting Expendables 2, and like,
please tell me how that had ended up.
It's his voice is like so gravelly in real life. It's like the first thing he says is "yo." I was like, oh Jesus, it's like, it's like almost like he had the best like smoker voice without actually smoking.
And then the microphone exploded and they had to get a new one.
I'm sorry, this is a thing I have to do,
Oh yeah, if you're listening to this, Sylvester Stallone,
which I would love it if they made a sequel, if he was actually playing a character like Groot or something. Like, I'm Groot, you are Groot, I'm Groot.
Okay, I think you're pushing
Groot
it. That sounds good.
I'm Groot.
That doesn't even sound good in theory. So.
I know, but it would just be so weird to see. He could play Groot's dad in the future. Who knows?
Okay, you can get.
We had a movie about Peter's dad. Now we can see Groot's dad.
Yeah, the first movie was about mothers. The second movie is about fathers. I guess the third films are about bizarre. Oh
Uncle.
yeah, I was about to say bizarre uncles that sound like Sylvester Stallone.
So hold on, and all his whole entire dialogue would just be, "I am Groot too."
Joking aside, though, I do have to admit that it's great to see Sylvester Stallone in this movie, especially playing a rather major character in the lore of Guardians of the Galaxy. So much so that
Yeah.
James Gunn has been wanting to do this character for a while. But interestingly enough, I should mention that he's probably the most straight-faced of all the characters, although he does get a little bit of a gag at the end.
And another thing that I like about this story overall is that it expands on, like you said, the lore of the first movie, where they left the first movie. In the first movie, they hinted at Peter's very alien origin. And however, it didn't really affect the plot whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
However, what was really amazing was that they were able to take that that loose end and turn it into a big plot line here, with the reveal of the Celestial, that is Ego, the living planet. We learned more about the politics behind the Ravengers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as I was saying, you're still recording?
Yes, I'm still recording. My internet just went out, so we can continue recording. Let's just continue recording.
Okay.
Right, if it happens again, just wait a little longer. I might have to readjust my machine.
Okay, so as I was saying, one of the biggest things that I liked about this plot was how it was able to expand the lore, mostly with like the reveal of Peter's father, which was hinted at the very, very end of the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And they also expand on the kind of the politics of the Ravenger space pirates. And so it makes this universe a lot bigger, a lot more unique, and it adds more depth to Peter as well as Yondu, especially, which Yondu was a lot of fun in the first movie. However, I came to love this character with the sequel.
That seems to be the general consensus with Yondu. Like, I know a lot of people liked him in the first film, but a lot more people, the vast majority of the movie-going public, really didn't think too much of the character. And of course, diehard Yondu fans were not happy with the sudden change into Michael, what's the name of the actor?
Rooker.
Michael Rooker, space redneck, or space hillbilly, as we should say, because there are hillbillies in space. But
that's a dangerous combination.
Yes. But I do have to admit, it's like I agree with a lot of other critics. He pretty much steals this movie in the second half.
And he obviously gives a lot of heart for those who have seen the movie already. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you want to bring up before we head into spoiler territory?
Not other than just our basic thumbs up or thumbs down on this movie. I would definitely recommend go seeing it. It helps to see the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, but that's less like homework and more like just an enjoyable appetizer to the main course. But yeah, no, I definitely recommend this movie. It was a lot of fun. It's like, for crying out loud, my mother is a big fan of the first movie. In fact, she watches it often on television whenever it comes on. So for Mother's Day, and we're actually recording this on Mother's Day, me and my two brothers, my two younger brothers, Miguel and Gabe, we decided to go take her to the movies, early morning Sunday showing of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And it's like the boys have already seen it beforehand. They were slightly hungover from the night before playing D&D, because that's what you do at Dungeons and Dragons. I barely got enough sleep myself the night before. But the thing is, we were all enjoying it. We were all laughing, at jokes we've seen beforehand. She was enjoying it, and of course everyone was clapping. And I know some of my friends are cynical and think that movie theaters are always packed for popular movies, but barely anyone's awake at 8:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and the theater we were at was halfway full. Wow. Yeah, a theater that could fit 70 people was filled with 30 people. So yeah, I'm really happy this movie's doing exceptionally well. And if this is a sign for what's to come, I'm really looking forward to Thor Ragnarok, as well as the two Infinity War movies. just terrible Peter Parker related road bump in between, but we'll get past that. Have I hinted that I'm not a big fan of Spider-Man just because of the overexposure and not because of anything related to the character or his merits?
And I thought you had a hate boner for Batman.
I hate all characters at any moment.
I hate everything.
Yeah, just give me 3 more days. I might turn my opinion on everything we just discussed here. So
yeah, the Guardians of the Guardians of the Galaxy are overexposed. Fuck
yeah,
them.
today gold people, fantastic execution. Tomorrow gold people, how unimaginative.
What is this? That stupid Greek movie that everyone's already forgot about?
Oh wow, I thought you were talking about like those really, really bad Italian rip-offs of Star Wars.
No. There was a movie with gold Greek gods, and they were fighting like black gods or demons or something.
Immortals?
It was a movie that had, maybe it was Immortals. It had Henry Cavill in it.
It was probably Immortals. No offense to Henry Cavill, but he keeps showing up in not so good Hollywood movies.
Yeah, it was Immortals, that one movie from 2011 that that showed up and then disappeared and nobody gave a shit.
Yeah, I have to see that movie because I keep hearing mixed feelings. Some people say it's good, some people say it's bad, but it's one of those movies.
Either way, it didn't matter because nobody talks about it anymore.
Either way, it's a forgettable movie.
We're probably the first people in like 6 years to have ever talked about it.
Oh wow, talk about an obscure reference. Hey, have you ever seen the movie The Monster That Challenged the World?
I heard the title of The Monster That Challenged the World.
Okay, I'm trying to think of an obscure movie we can get even further into. That joke went nowhere.
Anyways,
gold people.
I did remember one thing that I had issue with, and it wasn't the gold people. One of the biggest things I didn't like was how about like near the halfway point, the plot kind of went into a particular beat that I was not a fan of, where I've seen this. It's kind of the whole missing relative thing, where you have the missing relative.
Do you want to save this for the spoiler section?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to try to not be spoilers, but there's always a point where a character finds some place and the character wants to stay in this new place, but then the other character's like, I don't think that you should stay in this place. And the other person's like, you're just jealous because I'm happy and I haven't been happy in a long time. And then there's the classic misunderstanding. And then they say, oh, you're just pig-headed. You're just being stubborn. No, you're being stubborn. And then they went their separate ways before making up by the very end and realizing he was wrong the whole time.
That's a good point you bring up, but in the film's defense, it's a minor hiccup compared to, say, movies where like a really minor misunderstanding leads to everybody almost dying at the end of the epilogue, which is basically every romantic comedy ever made that doesn't have sci-fi elements in it.
Yeah, it doesn't get that bad. It doesn't get to a point where the characters could have avoided this entire mess had they just talked it out. And here in this movie, they do attempt to talk it out despite their stubbornness and inner fears and personal struggles.
Oh man, so many Hollywood cliches we could do entire podcasts of it, but I'm going to try to keep myself from going there. But I totally get what you're saying. Like I said, for this movie, it was just a minor hiccup, so I didn't mind it that bad, as opposed to other movies where it really is a misunderstanding that could be taken care of with like a 5-word sentence. So,
and also, I'm glad by the very end of the movie, again, without spoiling, it could have gone into what I call like the Age of Ultron sort of cliche, where you have one powerful character and a bunch of nameless henchmen, but it had the potential to do something like that, given what the characters eventually confront by the very end. However, they didn't go that route, and it led to a very creative final battle, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, but no, I would definitely recommend this movie. Of my 4-star system, I would say it's almost 3 stars and a half. On a 5-star system, 4 stars and a half. How about you?
I would give it a solid 4 out of 5 from me. So it's not, like I keep saying, it's not a mind-blowing movie, but it is like Kong Skull Island. It is a damn good, fun energetic, imaginative movie that's sure to give you a hell of a lot of fun, give you a really goddamn fun time at the movies. And when it comes out on video, DVD, Blu-ray, I highly recommend you get it. Even get the soundtrack. I forgot to mention the soundtrack itself. It's not as poppy or as like energetic as the first movie, but it goes into a very interesting direction with the music. It's a lot more atmospheric and very soothing overall in general. And there's not a lot of like super instantly recognizable songs that multi-generational like that will appeal to multi-generational people like it did with the first one. Actually, this one there were several songs that I've never even heard of before, despite being someone who generally prefers like old school music. And so even if though I didn't have that nostalgic connection to the soundtrack, it fit with a lot of the moments that the songs were used in, and really showed it to Suicide Squad how you incorporate licensed music into your movies. And the last thing I wanted to say was that what was it? Oh yeah, I liked how a lot of the handling of the songs were used, where you would hear this. They would play up the song for comedy, where you would have, especially like the beautiful intro to the movie, where something big and crazy and action packed is happening, and yet you have this very happy tune that kind of shows the offbeat, quirky nature of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise.
A rather heartfelt and charming love song come a little bit closer, used for a rather dark yet equally uplifting sequence.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, which was my favorite usage of. That's another thing about this movie. I agree with you completely. They just don't throw in a bunch of songs in here. The first film did a good job adding songs that matched with what was going on. It wasn't just a jukebox musical, or like
Which was what happened with Suicide Squad. It was just someone put their iPod on put their MP3 player on shuffle, and then just started changing the songs every couple minutes.
Yeah, but with here though, they actually incorporated songs into the action sequences to such a point that we get almost music video-like vignettes. You know,
oh yeah,
in fact, I'd say this is the first Hollywood movie in a long time that felt like a real, not only does it feel like a true comic book movie, like a true fantasy film, but it also feels more true to the aesthetic of a true musical, as opposed to what we've been getting a lot lately.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also makes up for the score, because a lot of the Marvel movies have very forgettable scores. And so I feel like what James Gunn decided to do here with his movie was a brilliant creative choice.
With that says, though, even knowing the additional soundtrack compared to the original score itself is much more memorable, the original score itself still stands on its own. And the combination of both musical extremes works beautifully, especially in the final battle, where it is just an original orchestral score that eases into a really awesome song, which I think is, I forget what the song is, but it just has, when basically our heroes get their big moment to fight against a villain, that really cool song comes up. I can't think of it though, what the real title for it is.
Okay,
but
to go back to Sure, but to go back to my ending thoughts is, yes, it's a solid movie. It does great at a lot of things, and I highly recommend you check it out. And it's worth, it's one of those movies that's worth going back to again and again. So yeah, it's a solid recommendation from both of us to definitely go see it. So to go into spoiler territory, what is the first thing you want to talk about?
Okay, I want to definitely talk about the villains. Okay, so the problem with the Marvel movies is a lot of villains have taken a back seat, but I think that has less to do with screen time and an over focus on the heroes than it has to do with just making the villains very two-dimensional. And here, they did something very intelligent where, again, like you said, they give a lot of really good jokes and character moments to everybody in this movie, even the henchmen. And it's not only true for the Sovereign, but also for the Ravengers, Yondu's mutinous group under the command of Taserface, as well as,
which sounds like an 80s action figure character name.
To the best of my knowledge, I think Taserface is actually one of those villains from the early 90s. So it's kind of like taking a piss out of some of the insane character choices that the 90s comic book scene gave us. But no, the great thing is they added a lot of humor with the villains. And those little character moments go a long way, because the villains actually feel like they matter this time. They're memorable in their own right. Even even some of the bad Ravengers who mutiny against Yondu, they have some really good, funny
Uh-huh.
back and forth. I especially love the one henchman, Jeff, who, it's like, whoa, do it with the little tree man. Can I kill it with the rock? And then, of course, and Taserface's reply is like, no, it is too adorable to kill. So,
Or what was it early on when the where it's like, hey, like why should we only get like 25%? That's like 10 less or whatever. That's only like 25% of 100 million, whatever the currency is. That's only like 10 million.
and then
It's like,
Yondu's
no.
like, no, that math doesn't work like that.
They're like, no, obviously it's only 25% is only 25% of a million is 25.
I don't know if you're doing a really good impression or you're just as confused as the Ravengers are. Oh,
I'm gonna go with that
okay.
one. I'm gonna go with the first one. Well, I'm gonna go with the first one.
Okay. You could have done what our friend Jesse does and just say yes to either answer. Confuse us even further to which one is the true answer. But no. What's funny
Sure.
is about the Ravengers, though. What's funny is upon watching the movie a third time, they do some pretty horrible stuff. These are space pirates who are very ruthless and despicable, and yet they act like they're giant children and babies. Like, especially when you
Yeah.
notice the same Ravengers who kill some of their own men in the most horrible way imaginable are later seen
Yeah,
sleeping with their thumbs in their mouths or with little teddy bears in their arms. And
Yeah.
and with that says, I love Taserface. He's barely in the movie, but what time he is in there, he's great. To me, he's the villain that Galaxy Quest was missing. It's like, no offense to Ceres, that was a really cool looking villain and a very menacing threat, but it was like an out of place straight man in a film filled with a lot of good comedic characters and moments.
Kind of like the first Guardians of the Galaxy, where they had, what's his name? The decider, the judger.
No, Rohan the Accuser. Rohan the Accuser.
Accuser.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it was like some judge or like some court related
No,
name.
Rohan. It's funny too because I'm one of the few guys who actually liked Rohan the Accuser. I thought he was a very serviceable villain.
I thought he was rather generic in one note for me.
He was generic in one note. I do have to admit that.
And he was also kind of like the straight man in a movie filled with like crazy over the top personalities.
Yeah, but with that says, he was definitely a prominent menace. He didn't feel like a minor thing that he wasn't like this major thing that would just show up at the beginning of the movie and then we see at the end. It's like, as much as I enjoyed Ultron and Age of Ultron, Ultron felt like he took a distant back seat to everything else that was going on, not just the comedy and the heroes, but again, the MCU doing house cleanup with their continuity. Here, though, again, they spreaded the humor to the villains, and because of which the villains feel three-dimensional despite their limited screen time. Of the three villain groups we have here, the Sovereign are definitely the weakest, but again, they got some great moments of comedy we discuss later. And
they serve their purpose as a neat little piece of lore that will eventually grow to a much more prominent role when they teased Adam Warlock in the next for the next Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie.
Yeah, so that's another thing. It's revealed at the end of the movie that Adam Warlock is being created by the Sovereign's mistress, Aisha, who, strangely enough, is supposed to be a good guy in the original comic, so I wonder if she's going to...
Wasn't he the leader of the original Guardians of the Galaxy?
Adam Warlock is a weird character. He comes somewhere in between the two major groups of Guardians of the Galaxy. But yes, he did serve as mostly the leader at the early incarnations of the 70s, but he was also a major character in his own right without a team. So, in fact, Adam Warlock was actually a really big deal back in the 1970s. So it's interesting to see how they're going to reintroduce him proper to modern audiences, although I don't know how he's doing in current comic book fare.
Okay, because I remember reading him, because I actually read Infinity, what do you call it? What's Infinity Stones? Infinity Gauntlet. I read the story, and he was prominently featured in the story.
Yeah. Fun fact, the character was heavily inspired by Jesus Christ Superstar, so that's why he's... that's why he's sort of this glam rock space Jesus type superhero.
Funny enough, I'm surprised they didn't go too far with the Jesus allegory with Peter Quill,
They actually do go.
because he is literally the son of a
Yeah,
god.
actually, we'll get into that in a little bit, but no, the
Uh-huh.
the great thing is the Sovereign in any other Marvel movie, they would probably be very boring opponents, sort of like what they did
Uh-huh.
with
Kind of like the Thor Ragnarok, like
Thor: The Dark World.
Thor the Dark World, yeah, the villain sad Thor fights at the beginning of the
Yeah,
movie.
and just to quickly get back to Rohan the Accuser, I didn't mind the character because he was a prominent threat that we saw throughout the film, and he definitely held his own against our heroes.
Mhm.
As opposed to something like Ultron, where if you watch Age of Ultron again, there are whole stretches of the movie where you forget they're fighting a robot. Because we're spending too much time with our heroes or too much time setting up plot points for future movies. But here, no, adding the little character moments work beautifully, and the Sovereigns, even knowing they're these kind of golden douchebags, you do get a sense they're not really bad people. They're just not used to being told what to do by lesser life forms. And you kind of have a little bit of empathy for these these stuffy golden British twits, if you will. But at the same time, it is funny that this Aisha character is, she's committing all this mayhem and destruction just to kill people for what is basically petty theft. So because they can easily make these batteries again, it's like the Sovereigns have the technology and the means. But as awesome as the Ravagers and the Sovereign is, we definitely have to talk about the main villain, which goes back to a point you just made about the whole God allegory. Yes, there is no Jesus Christ thing going on, but the thing I got out of it was a great mix of the original Marvel comic books, which I think is sort of that whole Jack Kirby weird monster space stuff. H.P. Lovecraft, because there's a lot of Lovecraftian elements going on with Ego, despite the fact that it's the friendly face of Kurt Russell we see most of the time. But the biggest one is the Greek gods. Traditionally, the Greek gods were very, regardless if they were benevolent or malevolent, the Greek gods were very petty people, and their petty squibbles and disagreements and actions and failures resulted in a lot of death and destruction and hell for a lot of innocent people. And Ego really does feel like a more accurate version of Zeus than what we usually see in films based on Greek mythology. He might seem to be a very affable guy, but he's done some pretty horrible things for reasons that might seem understandable, but are still pretty despicable and hard to forgive. So, basically, I'm about to reveal a big spoiler here. Ego was in love with Peter Quill's mother. That resulted in the birth of Peter Quill. Peter Quill being sort of a demigod, if you will, a Hercules from Zeus. However, because Ego had bigger plans and didn't want something like love to get in the way, he kind of nonchalantly, much like how somebody would eat a dog and their own pet dog in a time of crisis, especially if they love that dog, killed Peter Quill's mom just so he would focus on his bigger plan. And and Kurt Russell delivers it in such a nonchalant way that it makes 98% of all the anime villains we've ever seen who've had similar motives and backstories seem pretty less hateable. Because we know those guys are assholes, but it's like this character, it's like
there was always someone for that they would care to protect. For like there are always characters that there's always like some character in their life that they're willing to protect no matter what happens. And here it doesn't. He's willing to make the sacrifice.
Yeah, and again, that whole nonchalant way he went about with a smile really feels like Zeus going like, I don't like the I don't like the way this temple looks, and then knocks it over and kills 500 people inside. So oops, that's Zeus.
A very insensitive way of how he delivered it, which was perfect for that character.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's where I think the comparison to the Greek gods fit perfectly, because if you really get into mythology, a lot of the Greek gods, even the ones who were supposedly nice people, were pretty a horrible lot. And it's funny, a lot of people like to make comparisons to like modern day superheroes to the Greek gods, and as horrible as, well, actually now thinking about it, I just defeated my own argument, because considering all the collateral damage in a lot of the recent DC movies like Suicide Squad and Man of Steel, I think the DC heroes have finally reached the Greek god level that everyone compares them to. Well,
Uh-huh.
and ironic too, because one of my favorite Greek gods is Hades, and as much as he's portrayed as a villain, he's a fairly nice guy, all things considering. So, but
Uh-huh.
no, I think Ego was a perfect example of that. This sort of godlike father figure who is very affable and likable, but the things he does for his own personal goals and his own, not, I don't want to call them greedy, but they're definitely selfish, is almost unforgivable, and you definitely relate with Peter Quill. And even though it kind of sucks that the MCU has this terrible habit of hiring really awesome veteran actors who you know are going to end up the villain because they're too old to be marketable.
Or to pay them multiple time for multiple multi-movie roles.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, it's something of a minor miracle Michael Douglas didn't explode at the end of Ant-Man's. It's like, I'll hold on to this bomb. You guys run away. Boom. Oh no, no more Michael Douglas. Oh well. I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay. But no, Kurt Douglas did a really good job with the role. And of course, it also matches perfectly with, who plays Peter Quill?
Oh, it was... Damn it, why am I blanking out on his name? It should be easy to remember.
Oh, Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt,
Yeah,
yes.
they complement each other incredibly well, especially with
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
especially with that wonderful scene where Ego delivers his rather beautiful speech upon first meeting our heroes. And he says, "Now if you excuse me, I got to go take a pee." So
Yeah. Yeah, they do have a bit of a similar sense of humor
Mhm.
when we initially see Ego. And what's really nice is that Chris Pratt, he seems like the kind of person who would have been a fanboy of Kurt Russell's movies. Because, as any child of the 80s, who wouldn't have loved Kurt to have Kurt Russell as their dad?
I don't know how much of Kurt Russell's filmography you're familiar with. Well,
Yeah.
I got to stop assuming you're a 90s kid, but you are a 90s kid. I'm sorry.
I am.
Yeah, so it's like, but me and my brothers and my parents, we would make it a Christmas tradition to watch Big Trouble in Little China whenever it would come on around that time. So yeah, so we love we love Kurt Russell a lot. I almost called him Kurt Douglas. I'm getting my celebrities wrong. I'm getting them mixed up.
Anyways, as for Kurt Cameron here,
Right.
he's played a very nice villain.
Yes. Oh, fantastic. Again, I'm a big fan of giant monsters. That goes without saying. You throw in a giant monster in any movie, I'll instantly give it a couple of points up on the enjoyment level or the thumbs up level. But when the giant monster in question is very imaginative and is a good character in its own right, it's a win-win. And I think so. Even knowing some of the subplot related to Ego has been done to death in multiple MCU movies, as well as the heel turn, which is common of Disney movies in general. I still have to admit, this is definitely one of the best villains of the MCU so far. And it's weird, ever since we got into the cosmic era of the Phase 3 of the MCU, we've been getting a lot of surprisingly decent villains. Dormammu from Doctor Strange was a bit of a disappointment in many regards for me.
I expected to see the guy with the flaming head, but we didn't get
Yeah,
that.
and instead we just got this barely seen CGI character that was just a step up from...
And his lackey would turn out to be like the main villain for most of the movie, which was again kind of very forgettable.
But with that says, his lackey was actually a pretty engaging character, especially with his motives for serving such an evil creature. And of course, and also it's a great introduction to another villain who will no doubt be making more appearances in future.
Oh yeah.
What is his name? Mardu or
Morlock?
Mordu.
Mordu.
Yes.
Hold on, let me find
Yeah,
out.
let's
right
let's
now.
double check, because if Mark Tucker is listening to this and he loves Doctor Strange, he's gonna be pissed.
Mordo.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it was a good introduction.
Like I knew the whole time.
Yes, you did. So did I. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. No, Mordo. Yes, they did a really good job introducing Mordo as an ally and friend who is very engaged in his own right. So when he comes back as a villain, I think he's going to have as much of a big impact as Loki did. But even better, because we've actually seen this guy with his heart open as a true hero. So, and it's funny too, because a lot of people complain about how crappy the MCU villains can be, and yet those two villains, not counting Mormandu, wow, darn it,
Mordo.
the big flaming head guy,
Dormammu.
Dormammu. Yeah, no, darn it.
Mamu.
Big flaming head dude. um,
Ghost Rider.
Thank you. Yes, Ghost Rider. No, Doctor Strange actually got a lot of good praise about how good its secondary main villain and its supposed future villain got, and I think Guardians of the Galaxy definitely, again, extrapolated from that success and gave us three really good group of villains, with Ego being the VIP of this particular movie. And again, I'm looking very forward to see what kind of business the villains are going to be like. What the villains are going to be like in Thor Ragnarok, and a little bit, admittedly, I do want to see what Michael Keaton's going to do with the Vulture in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no. I think based on Doctor Strange, its beginning success, and the major successes we had here, I think maybe the MCU is finally out of its villain rut. Getting back to Ego, though, I think he's also one of the best from comic books to screen adaptations of a character I've ever seen, because there's a lot of the familiar elements we know about Ego the Living Planet from the comic books, but they also threw in a lot of really cool new stuff for the movie that really makes Ego a very imaginative character. Even if you can do the argument that his plot for universal domination has been done to death beforehand, it's still a very colorful, very unique, very memorable monster villain.
Mm. And it helps that he's being played by a very charismatic and experienced actor as Kurt Russell.
Exactly.
Although, like I said, we had charismatic actors play sadly forgettable roles, like what happened with Christopher Eccleston in Thor: The Dark World. But luckily, that wasn't the case here.
Yeah, there was also Jeff Bridges as the Ironmonger, and
I would defend Jeff Bridges. I thought he played a very serviceable villain in the movie.
Okay, I'll give you that. It's I have Rohan the Accuser. You can have the Ironmonger. So.
If you want, you can take what's his name? Who was he for he was Whiplash in Iron Man 2.
Yeah, that was a good actor given wasted. That's a good comparison.
Why make him a lackey if he had his own goals and motivations?
Yeah, it's like, I hate to say it, I think oh darn it, what's his face?
Mickey Rourke. That's
Yeah. No,
that's his name.
Yeah, I think the Weasley little corporate guy who was supposed to win.
Oh yeah, I hated that. He was pointless.
Yeah, he was pointless. Yet he was played by a good character actor. So, but yeah, again, a lot of these really good actors they hire to play villains, and they get completely wasted. And ironically, what that says, Karen Gillan as Nebula actually gets to shine here, even though she's more or less still playing the same character from the first Guardians of the Galaxy. So, which is probably why there seems to be more Nebula fans now than there was for the first film.
And I do like how she's able to help set up our other villain, Thanos.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny, Thanos doesn't show up at all in this movie, yet we feel Thanos' impact a lot better than we did in some of the other Marvel movies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, he's another person who's willing to harm the people that are supposedly the closest to him.
And unlike Ego, who just does it like a Greek god to ants on his shoulder, Thanos definitely has some dark, romantic,
experimental twisting of the I was going to say human body, but like just any sort of experimentations to make people stronger against their will.
Yeah, and also, if you know Thanos, he definitely has some dark desires to do what he does. So, but we'll get to that later.
Dark desires.
So, deadly desires. Get it? Okay. So no, I think they really hit it out of the ballpark with the villains. I know some people have been complaining about Ego being too weird of a character once he becomes full-on H.P. Lovecraft kaiju Zeus god monster. And then, of course, there's a lot of people who think the Sovereign are completely forgettable. But to be fair, a lot of these people are also the same kind of people who, you know, they probably go to a circus and complain why the clowns don't look more realistic. So screw them.
And I will also want to say that, like, what he did with all of his previous sons was really fucked up.
Yeah, that was... Again, we've seen similar plot points with other villains in anime. The whole idea of killing off all your offspring for very petty and selfish reasons. But for some reason, this one felt it's like when they showed a brief sequence of him in his human form making love to all these various aliens, it felt like almost like a
You were thinking to yourself, why can't I be like
oh no
that?
no no no. For once, it was like Captain Kirk by the way of David Lynch. It's like no, this
Uh-huh.
is just wrong and horrible.
Yeah, it does, because they made his relationship with the mother very unique, very special. And then when you see that, it's just very heartbreaking to see that it wasn't a unique special thing, but he was just using her like he did with all these other women,
And the
females,
sheer
technically.
variety of alien life forms he's made out. It's like some of those girls weren't even humanoid. They were like a jellyfish
Uh,
and a plant at some point. But it's like, yeah, no, no. I know everyone likes to make fun of me being in Shoma, but in all honesty, when I
yeah.
saw that scene, it just almost made me want to throw up because it really showed just how again, it's like when you get into the Greek mythologies behind Zeus and Poseidon, it's you realize just how messed up these Greek gods are, and you want to go down into the underworld and hang out with Hades. So that's how bad they get.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So, anyways, is there anything else left to talk about before we end things here?
Well, let's talk about the heroes. We're not going to go into detail about all of them, but let's just talk about our favorite,
Okay.
our who are our more favorite characters between the two of us.
Okay. All right. So, who was your favorite?
Um, Yondu almost stole the show, but
Yeah.
I think Rocket probably had the best subplot throughout the whole movie, because I think he's finally
Probably.
yeah
Yeah.
he's finally coming to terms with the fact that he just can't be an asshole the whole time, despite his love for Groot.
Uh huh.
Um, Gamora and even Peter Quill are kind of pushed a bit into the background compared to the antics of the other characters, but they still had some
Uh
very
huh.
wonderful moments there. I love that Nebula comes back and she's actually given much more um, two-dimensional elements to work with, along with Krieger, or what's his name? Krieger? Yondu's second in command.
Oh, okay. I forgot his
Yeah,
name.
hold on, I'm about to get his name right here. Oh, Kraglin. That character really came into his own as well. In fact, all the good guys do very well.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to admit, Mantis is just too sweet and adorable, and I'm not just saying that because she's easy on the,
Because you're in
yeah,
Shoma.
I'm not just saying that because she's easy on the eye. She's literally somebody you just want to just hug and say, "Oh, we'll be your best friend." She's that lovable and cute, and it's a really good job from this actress whose name I'm not even going to say completely. Her first name is Palm, so that's all you need to know. And her
Uh huh.
interaction with Drax was very sweet. Although
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know if they're going to end up being in a romantic relationship or if it's going to be a platonic father-daughter relationship. Especially
Uh
after Drax made it very clear he does not find her attractive one bit.
no.
And of course, it's great to see Drax the Destroyer. It seems he's finally lighting up after the events of the first Guardians of the Galaxy. And
Right.
with that says the fact that he's trying to make jokes in his own right and they fail miserably,
Yeah.
but you still love that this is a Drax who's over
Yeah.
his
She just shared your darkest secret.
yeah. It's like my favorite part is like I don't. It's like it seems Drax. I can't really say because there's so many good Drax jokes here.
I guess well, a lot of his humor comes from his lack of subtlety, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and his
Oh
bluntness.
yeah, indeed. It's
Maybe soon you will find a girl who is just as pathetic as you.
right, indeed. But it's like the thing about Drax is I think he got over a lot of the trauma that was introduced in the first movie. So now this is the
Yeah.
Drax we're seeing who's open up to enjoying life. And he
Mm.
definitely seems to be an incredible optimist. It's like, the beast cannot be destroyed from the outside. I must go in and destroy from the inside. Ah!
Rushes into things without a second thought.
Indeed, indeed.
Like jumping out of a flying spaceship tied only by a cable.
Die, spaceship, die! Baby Groot is adorable, of course, but at the same time, I was surprised how much of a terrible two he was, in the sense that he was, terrible two is of course a reference when a kid is 2 years old. They're usually a terrible brat.
uh, I did like how that was able to distinguish Baby Groot from the original Groot, because apparently, while it's technically the same character, he has none of the memories, and so he's kind of brought up as a new individual.
I think the first Groot was much more sweeter, much more experienced, and then when he's resurrected
Uh-huh.
as Baby Groot, this again, he's in his terrible twos. He's this little brat who He's still lovable, and I even love the little the again small character moments go a long way. I love that he
Hmm.
really does. Like in the first film, him and Gamora never really got along. Even
Right.
though Groot was definitely much more of the he was definitely more willing to hand out the branch of peace there. Here, though, it's
Uh-huh.
obvious that Baby Groot kind of sees Gamora as as a mother figure, and there are some very sweet moments between the two of them.
Oh yeah, and it seems like everyone has a much larger respect for Baby Groot, maybe possibly because of the sacrifice that the old Groot made.
Yeah, even when Drax the Destroyer kind of teases him a bit, like, out of the way, smaller, dumber Groot.
Yes.
It's yeah. In fact, all the heroes, like again, every character in this movie has great moments. It's
Hmm.
like this is definitely an ensemble of just good character moments and good characters and really talented and funny and likable actors doing it. It's a
Hmm.
win-win. So I think there's not much to say there other than to watch the movie and experience it yourself. Anything you want to bring up before
Absolutely.
we finally end this
Uh,
monstrosity of
ooh.
an interdimensional rainbow spewing podcast?
We finally got the Watchers.
Yes, Oh, yes. Okay. Now it has not been confirmed that Stanley himself is a member of the Watchers race, even though he's being credited as Watcher Informant. But that could mean that could mean anything. He could just be Stanley. Just
Although it seems to solidify the fact that all of Stanley's cameos are the same character.
yeah, but the thing is, the fan theory was that he himself was a member of the
Oh
Watcher
yeah,
race.
yeah.
But at the same time, I
Right.
think it works just as well to find out that he's been.
However, he seems to interact too much with characters to be to be considered a
That is
Watcher.
true.
Especially in the Incredible Hulk, where he's kind of like the reason why the government tracks his death is the reason why the government tracks the Hulk down at the beginning of the
His
movie.
death or his Hulk empowerment. It's I would love to recut that movie where the moment he drinks the soda and drops it, we cut to his guest appearance on The Simpsons where he tries to pretend he's the Hulk. Because that's just too perfect. I don't know if one was referencing the other or vice versa. So, but
Uh-huh.
no, he's pretty much been labeled the Watcher's informant, and I think it works okay because
In the credits?
yes, in the credits,
Okay.
not wait a minute. No, no, no. He's been referred to as an informant for the Watchers through various articles and news stories I've seen, but he has not been
Okay.
confirmed to be a Watcher himself. So that we can definitely say for sure. But no, it was good to see the Watchers. It was finally nice to see the Watchers introduced into the MCU. I don't know if they're going to play a major role in later stories or if they were just there for cameo fodder. It was good to see Howard the Duck again, although
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's I like Howard the Duck. Even the terrible movie they made back in the 80s. I really hope that when we get to the third movie, he's brought in as an actual character who as a co-star with everyone else.
Okay.
I did notice they kind of softened his design. He looks more cartoonish to his original comic book counterpart. And of course,
And was it mere that they made his voice sound less deep and sound less like a chain smoker?
yeah, they made it less deep. It's still Seth Green voicing the character though, but
Okay.
again, I think they definitely improved upon the Howard the Duck they had in the previous movie. And again, I would love to see
Okay.
Howard the Duck as an actual, co-starring character. Maybe he can be like this really great third cast member in the upcoming Infinity Wars. Like,
It looks like they're just gonna go ahead and just get every single character for that movie.
yeah, why not? So and it's like for crying out loud, they had Jeff Goldblum's Grandmaster do a surprise cameo dancing in the credits. So
Oh, really?
yeah, and he just shows up out of nowhere, and of course it's Jeff Goldblum being charming as Jeff Goldblum.
By the way, I sent an image to you on through Facebook that I think you will like.
Okay, I'll be checking that in a moment. But oh darn it, with that says though, yeah, it's great to see Stan Lee again. Although from what I understand, he's getting really old, and they filmed a lot of his cameos ahead of time.
Right, right. Maybe they already filmed the final one that reveals his true purpose. Maybe he is the hero of Infinity Wars.
Yeah, it's just the giant.
I brought you into this world. I'll take you out of it. Thanos, Excelsior!
The MCU ends, and then we're just stuck with more terrible X-Men movies. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. You son of a guns.
he decides to sell out the MCU and replace it with and remake the world as X-Men or all X-Men oriented.
Oh my goodness! Don't say that.
So instead of Guardians of the Galaxy, you'll just have like the Guardians of Shi'ar.
But okay, I just got your image. That's pretty good. But
that's the form he'll take when he takes on Thanos.
Yeah. It'd be really sad if it's like it turns out that Stan Lee is sort of this immortal being. He goes up to fight Thanos, but Thanos kills him as easily as Thor did that rock monster.
Or kind of like what happened in the comics where you had like Galactus and a bunch of other cosmic characters all get wiped out.
Uh-huh. But no, it's like the minute Stan Lee gets destroyed by Thanos, like all of a sudden we cut to Captain America and he's like, run away! And they just all the MCU characters just run like hell.
Run away! Run away!
It's like Don Cheeto and War Machine. It's like, oh no, my rocket boosters can't work. No! Poor Don Cheeto, he gets it pretty bad. I love his character, but War Machine doesn't have a good time in a lot of those movies.
Nah.
Oh.
So anyways,
it's a good movie.
I think it was a good movie, yes. So there you go. That's our ridiculously long and distracting review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We enjoyed it. We sure hope you will if you ever get the chance to check it out. So at the end of the day, where can people find you, Enshohma?
They can find me on DeviantArt at Enshohma. Again, just copy my name and put a Google search and you'll find both my DeviantArt account, my official Facebook account, Enshohma Lives, and my blog, Enshohma Corner, although that's the least updated of them all. Currently working on some comic books, although we don't know about a publisher just yet, but already I got 9 issues done, and hopefully we can get 12 more done within the month. So, not 12 more, up to 12. I'm no Stan Lee, for crying out loud. So.
Enough said.
Right. Excelsior, it means DC is for douchebags.
Anyway, and so you can check me out here on the Kaiju Noir channel as well. You can also find me on the Sons of Sarazawa podcast on Zazabar's channel. Look forward for future videos looking forward to future videos in the near future, such as this. What was the line from Plan 9 from Outer Space?
You people of Earth are idiots?
No, it's like future things such as this can only happen in the future.
Yes, okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So yeah, future videos like this can only happen in future videos in the future. So until next time, everybody, I've been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I'm Enshohma. I almost did the Galaxy gag again, but I'm not going to do it. Let's end this on a classy note.
All right, and until next time, everybody, take care.